Hi, welcome back. It's Hasnian with insidewebdev, and in this tutorial I'm gonna show you how to create your first RESTful API from scratch for total beginners. So without further ado, let's just get started. The first thing that we will need is Node.js installed, so go to nodejs.org and install either the current or the latest version. I would recommend installing the latest version. If we click here, since I'm using Mac, it will download this extension format. So just click save and install it. Once we have that, we can go to our terminal. So the first thing that we're gonna do is let's just make sure that we have Node installed. So we're gonna do node.version and we'll see that we have a Node version installed. So let's just init our project doing npm init. And then with this flag, we're gonna say, okay, skip all the questions that you're gonna be asking me and use default values. So if we go here, we'll see that we see Node Express REST, and we see a script, and we see that this is the license, and that's okay for now. We don't have to change any of that. So first of all, let's just install Express. npm install Express. If we go to a package.json, we'll see that now we have here Express installed. So that's great. First of all, let's just create a file called index.js. This file is gonna have all our server. So for now, let's just console log something. Let's just make sure that this is working and we don't have any issues. Let's just say hi, some exclamations mark, node index.js. And we see hi. So that's working. So now let's just start with our server. The first thing that we will need is import Express. So we do it like this. Express. So we have Express over here. Then we will also need something called body parser. Okay, this is gonna allow us to basically parse the body of our request. I'll explain this later. After that, let's just create our first Express application. So the way that we would do this is we can create a variable called app, and then over here we're just gonna called Express. Okay, and then we're gonna create our first server, and we're gonna say, okay, listen this app to a specific port, which is gonna be 3000. It can be any port as long as it's available, and if it's not, it's gonna try to change it to another one. And then we're gonna pass a callback, which is gonna be a function, and then over here we can pass anything. In our case, let's just say, hey, server is running on port 3000. Okay, now that we have this, let's just call this again, and if we try to import this, we will get this error. Can I use import statements outside a module? We haven't specified that we want to import using this syntax instead of the old one. So to fix this, let's just go to our package.json, and over here type, and then here we have two options. Let's just go with module, and let's just try to rerun this. And now we see, hey, server is running on port 3000. So if we go to our browser, so now we would see something like this. This is great. This means that our server is running. But why do we get this? This is because we haven't specified that we are gonna be returning something to this route. So first of all, let's go back. And let's just finish doing our setup. Finish our setup, we have to also use this body parser that we've imported here. So the way that we were going to be using this is .app.use, and then we're going to say body parser.json. And now we're good. Now we have to specify the routes. We have to do it over here after our body parser, okay? That's very important. So let's just go to here, and we're gonna first say app.get, and we're gonna specify route. In this case, we want to be the home one. This is the home one. So we have to say, okay, and we want to return something. Here is gonna take a callback, which has two parameters, request and response, and then here we can access them. So the way that we're gonna do this is res.send is going to allow us to send any kind of text. So let's just say hi. Let's just go back, refresh, and nothing is happening. The reason why is because the server is not restarting after every change. So what we could do is kill the server doing Command C or Control C, depending on your operating system. And if we try to rerun this and refresh this, we say hi. But what if I want to change this to say hi, Thomas? Now if we go back, it's still not refreshing. I have to kill the server and rerun it again. This is super annoying. So the way to fix this, we can use a library called nodemon. So we can do npm install nodemon. We want to make sure that this is a dev dependency. We don't want this on production. So let's just do this and go to our package.json, and let's just create our first script. We can get rid of this, and we're gonna call it this dev, and we're gonna say nodemon index.js npm run dev because this is the name of the script. Okay, we run this again and we see that that's working. Now if we say hey Maria, we'll go back, that's working. We don't have to refresh anything. Now that we're returning something like this, let's just try to return a valid JSON. So to do that, we would do like res.json, and then here we can pass any JSON. In our case, let's just go with name, and let's just give it a name of John, an age of 20, and let's just go back, and we see that that's the JSON. But even though it's a valid JSON, it's not being shown as one. So to fix that, we do have a couple of options. First one, we can use something like Postman. It's a free HTTP client that we can use. It's very powerful and very popular. I like to use this one. Insomnia is open source and it's also free. I like it better because it doesn't have that many stuff to distract you. It's more simple, more straightforward, and that's the one that we're going to be using for our tutorial. So let's just go to Insomnia. Let's just create a new collection. Let's just call it REST API. And then over here, let's just press this button and press new. And then we'll call it home. And then here, select get, create. And then over here, let's just paste our URL. Press send. And we see indeed that we're getting the nicely formatted JSON. We can also here preview this as raw data. That's what we were seeing before in our website. So let's just say preview. Now that we know that this is working, this endpoint is working, let's just create with our CRUD operations for creating a RESTful API. Normally, we don't have that over here. We don't have it in the index.js file. Because if we want to make this app bigger, we're gonna end up having a very long file. So normally what people do is create a routes folder. Since this is called a route, so let's just create a new routes. And since we're gonna be playing around with users, that's gonna be the example for this video. We're gonna create a users.js. So we will have to import first express from express. And then we will have to create a variable that's going to be called router. And router is going to have as value express.router. Router. And we can do the same as we did before. Instead of app.get, it's going to be router.get. And since we are playing around with users, since this app is going to be a RESTful API for users, we have to add the prefix users. So that's going to be our route. Let's just add our handler, which is going to be function, and then it's going to take request and response as two parameters. Now let's just say res.json, and it's going to return for now an empty array. So now we have to export this since we want to use this in another file, export default, and it's going to be router, which is this variable that we just created. Let's just go back to our index.js. we can get rid of this. And then here we can import user router from routes.user.js. And then over here is very important. It needs to be after this body parser. We will do app.use. And then we have to specify a route that we're going to be prefixing all these routers. I'm going to explain this in a moment. In this case, we just go with slash and user router. So now if we go back to Insomnia and we try to make a request to the home page, which is just slash, it's not going to work. And the reason why is because we've changed the route. Now it's not home, it's slash users. So let's just go to Insomnia and add slash users. And now we will see the empty array that we are sending, which is over here. So now I'm going to be explaining what this prefix is doing. Let's say that I wanted to add a prefix to all the routes inside this router. So what I would do is something like this, /API. And what this is doing is saying, okay, to all the routes inside this router, add this prefix. So we would end up having something like this. Now, if I go back to Insomnia, I try to rerun this. This is not going to work. Since I changed the prefix to being just slash to now being /API, now I have to do something like this. /API/users. Now, if I rerun this, I will get an empty array. That's to be expected. Now, if I remove this, if we go back to just the old simple users, that's going to work since we removed the /API. For normally in our APIs, we have the /API as the prefix. That's a standard. So in our case, we're going to keep it like that. Okay. So let's just keep it like that. Now we have our users, but this is just an empty array. Let's just create some users over here. /users is going to be an empty array of objects. And we're going to name this to John. Age 20. Users, we're going to change this to returning this array that we just created. So now if you go back to Insomnia, we make this call, we'll see that over here, we are returning the array. Let's just add some users. Amanda is going to be 22 and Rick is going to be 120. Okay. We have all the users over here. Now we can change the route to being something like, we can rename this to get all users. It makes more sense. Get all users, we're getting all the users. Now that we have the first one, which is getting all the users, let's just try to create a user. Router.post. That's another HTTP verb that we're going to be using. And the prefix for this handler is going to be users. So let's just copy this. And then it's going to be user. Then we add the handler that takes two parameters, request, response. And then over here, we can create a user. And the way that we can create a user is pretty simple. Since this is a JavaScript array, we can call the .push on it. So we can, first of all, we have to grab the information that we're sending from the client or from the front end. So the way that we can do this is first grabbing the body, which we can do doing request.body. And let's just console log this. Okay, let's just console log this. Now, let's just go to Insomnia or the HTTP client that you're using. And now let's just create new user. We have to select post and then over here, JSON. Now that we have our JSON, let's just try to send some data. The first one is going to be the name, which is going to be string. I'm going to say faker. Okay. And then the age is going to be 22. Now, if we send this, we do have to specify first a route, which is going to be exactly the same one, just changing it to being a post. Now just send. It's doing something. And then over here, if we go back to our terminal, we'll see that we have that information. Now we can grab the name and the age. We're going to be using something called object destruction, which allows us basically to grab parameters from an object. The way that we would do it is we do this, and this is going to create some variables for each parameter inside that object. So we're going to grab the name and the age from the body. Okay. So now we can console log this. We can console log just these two. Let's just go back, make a new request, and we see indeed faker, and then over here 22. That's great. Now that we have this, let's just push this information, this new user, to our array. Push, and we're gonna say name is gonna be name, and age is gonna be age. Then over here, we're gonna say rest.json, and we're gonna return the array. So now let's just go back over here. Let's just press, and we can see that new users are being added. Over here, this is a shorthand. You can remove this and just have name and age. And this is still gonna work since the key and the value are the same. Let's just do this. And as you can see, it still works. So now that we have all the users, we can create a user. Let's just try to get one user. So let's just start saying router.get, and we're gonna say users, and then ID. We're gonna use this syntax to specify that this is gonna be a dynamic value, and then we're gonna pass the handler, which is gonna be function, request, response. And now we can do something like this. Let's just do a send for now. Hi from here. Let's just go back to our HTTP client and create a new request, which is going to be get one user. We have to make sure that's get. We can copy all the URL. It's going to be the same, but at the end of it, we're going to be adding an extra value, which is going to be an ID. As I said before, this is going to be a dynamic value. So let's just add something like 1, and let's just try to make a call. And it says hi from here. So we know that that's working. But how do we access this? So the way that we do it is pretty simple. We can do something like ID or user ID. Let's just call it user ID. It's going to be request.params.id. This needs to match what we specified over here. So now if we let's just console log this plus over here, and let's just change this to something like user ID is, and something like that. Now let's just try this, and user ID is 1, user ID is 2, user ID is 3. We know that that's working. That's great. I've added some IDs to these users, as you can see over here. And now let's just try to get one user. So now let's just get one user. Const equals user equals users, which is the array. And we're going to call the find method. And then over here, this takes a function which has each user. Okay. And then over here, we can return the value if it's going to be true or false. So we want to grab the ID, and we want to check if it's the same as this one. So after that, let's just return JSON and return the ID. Now, if we run this, we see it's returning nothing. But this should work. The reason why is because over here, when we grab the ID, it's being used as a string and not as a number. We can fix that just transforming this user ID, which is a string, to a number using this method, this constructor, sorry, and that's going to work. Or we can do it over here, changing this to a string, and that would also work. Now we can get a user, but what about creating a user? The new user doesn't have an ID. Let's just add some random ID. There's a library for that, so let's just install it. Now that we are installing this, let's just rerun our server, and then over here we can import this new library. So the import is gonna look something like this. Before, that's the method, and we're gonna import it like this, v4 from UUID, and that's gonna be the name. We're gonna change this to this, so that's gonna be a new random ID that's gonna be generated. I'm gonna show it in a minute. And now over here, when we are creating a new user, we can add a new value, which is gonna be a field called ID, and we have to make sure that we are running this. Then over here, we will still, we don't have to stringify it anymore, since this is a string, and this is also a string, since this is gonna generate a string, as we can see over here. Now we have a unique ID. And if we create one, that's gonna work. But now if you try to get 3, it's not gonna work, since that's not found. So let's just try to copy this, which is something that already exists, and go over here. And if we paste this, and indeed is returning the one Amanda with age 22, and that's the ID, we can check it over here. As you can see, it's matching. Now let's just try to delete a user. Router dot delete, that's gonna be the verb, it's gonna be users /ID. We still need an identifier to delete something. Then the handler, request, response, and then we will grab the ID the same way. And now we want to remove the users or a user. The way that we would do this is using the filter method. So we can do users.filter, and then this is gonna take a callback, which will have as the first parameter user. And over here, let's just return something like return true. Now let's just return all the users using the res.json, and users request is gonna be delete a user. The verb is gonna be delete. We're gonna copy the same URL. So now if we try to run this, assignment to constant variable, that's happening because this is a constant and we cannot change constants, so we have to change this to a let. Now we will be able to change this. But the thing is that now, since we're returning true over here, none of the values are going to be filtered. All of them are good. So let's just change this to false, and we'll see that now an empty array will be returned. Now what we have to do is say user.id should not be equal to the user ID that I've provided. When this is false, okay, so when this is false, that item will be removed. If that's true, it won't be. So let's just grab all the users. Let's just grab this ID. Let's just go back over here and let's just try to remove it. And we have to grab a new ID again, since those are being auto-generated. And we see that that is removed. We grab that one, and that's gone. And let's just try it with this one. And Boom. Okay? We no longer have any items in our array. Now let's just go for the last one, which is the update. It's gonna be pretty simple to this one. So I'm just gonna copy it, and we're gonna go with put, or you can also use patch. Okay, there are some minor differences, but I'm not gonna explain it in this video. And then over here, we're gonna do something similar. We are gonna, instead of using the map, the filter, we're gonna be using map. And over here, we will need to also grab the values that are being passed. So we'll need the age, name, and as we did before, request.body. We're gonna grab this from that. So first of all, let's just call if user ID, which is this ID that's being generated over here, it's equal to the ID that's being provided as a parameter, like the one that's over here. Please grab, we're gonna return an object which is gonna have the name, okay? It's gonna have the name, and then also the same age, and then as the ID is gonna be the user ID. We can grab it like this, okay? Otherwise, just return the user, okay? Now that we have this, let's just go back to our HTTP client. We can duplicate either of these, and we can say here update user. Let's just change our verb to put, okay? And then over here, where the ID should be, let's just grab a new ID, which is gonna be this one. Paste it over here. We have to add a JSON body, which is gonna have name, which is gonna be test, and age is gonna be 200. Let's just call this, and indeed, as you can see, that's working. We do see that changing. If we change this to 199, we see that's working, and we can change this to say something like hello, this is my name. And as we can see, that's changing. Let's just grab Amanda's ID and paste it over here. And now Amanda has the same values. Now we can get all the users. We can create a user. We can get a user. We can delete a user, and we can also update a user. Now the last thing that we should be doing over here is that we have all our logic inside our routers file, and that's not good. So what we normally do is something like controllers, okay, controllers, and then over here we can create a users.js, okay, or user.js, just to keep. And now let's just call the method something like get users, okay, and request response, and let's just copy all the handler and paste it over here, okay. We're gonna do the same a couple of times. The next one is gonna be create user. We go over here, and let's just copy this. We paste it over here. The same with this. Get one user. We paste this. The next one is going to be delete user. And the last one is going to be update a user. Now that we have all of this, we can import them But first we have to allow the export. So let's just go with export. Let's just add it over here, export, export. And inside routes, let's just also grab this. Since it's no longer being used over here, we will need it over here. We also need to grab this. And then over here, we can say import, get users, get one user. Let's just say over here, get users, create a user. That's going to be another one, which is going to be over here. The next one is going to be get one user. Then delete user. We need to add this over here, otherwise it's going to complain. And the last one is going to be update user. All our routes without any logic in them, and the logic is inside the controllers, which are over here. They're over here. One last thing is this needs to be a .js. That's why it was complaining. If we go back, just test our app, it still works. We can get all users. We can create a user. We can get one user. We have to grab an ID over here. We can then update a user. And then also we can delete a user. So if I run this and I try to find this, it's not gonna work. So that was it. This was a very basic RESTful API. I try to make it as simple as possible for anyone who's just getting started with Express and with Node.js. This should be very easy to follow along. Thanks for everything, and if you liked it, leave a like in the description down below. If you want me to make some specific tutorial, just leave it there. I'll make sure to do it, and see you in the next one.